knitting. When these machines were built, there were 4 of the columns that were laying down horizontally, and all of the wiring was hanging out where the modules were. So these women would have a book that said, pick column 3, module 17, wire pair 32, and they would reach in with a pair of a knitting needle with a hook on the end and pull those wires out the side that you're seeing here in your image. Then they'd find the other column, slot, wire pair, and pull those out. And they had a series of metal bars. They'd say, okay, well, this one has to be 1 foot long, and they'd cut them off. And this other pair has to be 2 foot long, and they'd cut them off and strip the ends. There were 2 wires that got inserted into a little plastic thing, and they were soldered with a heat gun and then stuffed down. So you can imagine, as you do this over and over again, you get more and more wires pulled from the front of the machine to the back. And it was more and more difficult to get in there and get a hold of that pair of wires and pull them out for cutting and trimming and soldering. So it was just fantastic. And then they'd take a set of 4 columns and another set of 4 columns and stick them together like this, finally putting the last set of 4. So at that point, you've got a real mess trying to get the wiring from one end of the machine to the other. It was fantastic looking at that.
Clive, I don't remember her name, but one of the engineers that you had on one of our previous chats had actually done the wiring. She was the one with the 9-inch fingers. And she said it wasn't that hard to build the original machine. What was hard was when one failed and you had to go out and pick the correct wire to replace.
Yes, that was the marvelous Sonia,
yes.
who sent her apologies. She would have been along today,
yeah.
But had a conflict. And those wiring mats did feature in some of the later machines as well. They weren't quite as prominent on the later machines, but there were certainly in the YMP, the early YMPs that had the Y-shaped YMPs had some of that wiring in a tastier red color in those wings.
Charlie?
Yes, I was just going to add that the team that was referred to they called themselves SWAT, which was a special wiring assembly team, and they literally did jump on airplanes and go and fix the wires of a broken machine. However, the engineers on site were expected, if they crushed a pin when they put a module in, they were expected to drill it out and replace that wire themselves. And then what Sonia said on a previous call, her team would come in and fix the repairs that the engineers had done. Doesn't say much for the engineers, but never mind. I used to show these machines to people, obviously, and you do too. And there's over 20 miles of twisted wire, blue and white wire pair in there. And in the middle, which of course the 4 CPU columns are in the middle and then the memory's out on both sides. In the middle, it's like a 1.5 foot thick bunch of wires. So it is very difficult to find the wire in there. But I would show people around and show them the big bunch of wires and say it's actually quite simple because we always knew it was either a blue wire or a white wire.
Yeah.